At the class reunion, the bullies walked in wearing the same arrogant smiles. They laughed loudly, slapped each other's backs, believing the past was still theirs to control. They mocked the quiet man, the one who never fought back, the one who only brought a dog. They didn't see the scars. They didn't hear the years he endured in silence. But they had no idea. The broken boy from back then had become a Navy SEAL, and the dog beside him had been standing guard since the very first wound. Where are you watching from? Like and subscribe. Every follow helps us bring more meaningful stories. Now, let's begin. The snow in northern Maine did not fall dramatically. It drifted. Soft, patient, almost polite. Flakes settling into the grooves of pine branches, resting on the frozen shoulder of the road as if they had nowhere urgent to be. The late winter sun hung low and pale, turning the white ground into something luminous, like the world had been scrubbed clean and left to dry. Carter Vale stood at the edge of the training field, hands clasped behind his back, boots planted firmly in the snow. At 35, he moved with the controlled economy of someone who had learned long ago that wasted motion cost lives. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with a lean, coiled build shaped by years of operational training rather than bulk. His dark brown hair was cut short in a regulation military style, practical and unremarkable. His face was clean-shaven, angular, with a square jaw and faint lines etched beside his eyes, marks left by sun glare, sleepless nights, and decisions that had never come with clean answers. His eyes were gray-blue, steady and observant, the kind that noticed everything and reacted to almost nothing. Captain Carter Vale, U.S. Navy SEAL. The men in front of him, senior officers from multiple branches, were finishing the last drill of an advanced joint training course. The exercise had pushed them hard. Stress scenarios, leadership fractures, moral pressure tests designed not to break bodies, but to expose character. Carter had built the course himself. Not because he enjoyed authority, but because he understood something many instructors didn't. Skill failed most often, not from lack of knowledge, but from unresolved fear, and fear had patterns. He watched as the final team cleared the simulated extraction zone. No shouting, no triumph, just exhaustion and relief. When the exercise was called, the officers stood in a loose line, breath fogging the air. Carter stepped forward. "Good work," he said, voice calm, unraised. "You made mistakes. You adapted. That's the point." No motivational speech followed. Carter never gave them. He believed praise should be precise, not loud. One of the officers, a man in his late 20s, shifted forward slightly, as if wanting to say something, then stopped himself. Carter noticed. He always did. After the debrief and dismissals, the field emptied. Engines started. Doors slammed. The world resumed its ordinary noise. That was when Jason Hale pulled his truck up beside the snowbank. Jason was 27, broad-shouldered, with the raw physical confidence of a man who had not yet learned where his limits truly were, but wanted to. His hair was kept short, his face perpetually half tired, half alert. He had the posture of someone who took orders seriously and the eyes of someone who questioned them privately. Jason had grown up in the same region, same cold, same long winters. "Sir," Jason said, lowering the window, "you heading back into town?" Carter glanced toward the distant road where taxis sometimes passed, unreliable in winter. Then at Jason. "If you're offering," Carter said. "On my way anyway," Carter nodded once. "Appreciated." They drove in companionable silence at first, the truck humming over packed snow. Pines blurred past. The world felt wide and quiet. Jason broke the silence carefully. "So, leave coming up. Any plans?" Carter leaned back slightly, eyes on the road ahead. "Not really." Jason waited, then added lightly, Guess you don't strike me as a beach vacation guy." A corner of Carter's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Tonight," Carter said after a moment, "I've got a high school reunion." Jason blinked. "Really?" Jason laughed, genuine surprise in it. "That's kind of great, actually. Bet your class is full of amazing people." Carter didn't answer right away. Outside, sunlight caught the snow and scattered it into 1,000 small sparks. Carter watched them flicker and fade. "Some of them," he said finally. Jason glanced over, sensing something beneath the words, but didn't push. They reached Carter's home just outside town. A modest log house set back from the road, smoke rising faintly from the chimney. It looked like it belonged to someone who valued quiet. As Carter stepped out, the door of the house opened before he reached it. Coda stood framed in the doorway. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, large and powerfully built, with a black and tan sable coat that caught the light in layers. His amber eyes were sharp and expressive, his ears alert. There was intelligence in his gaze, not the trained obedience of a working dog, but something deeper, more personal. Coda was not military K-9. He had never been deployed, but he was Carter's constant. Jason whistled softly. "That's a good-looking dog." Coda watched Jason without aggression, head tilted slightly, assessing. "He knows," Carter said quietly. "If you mean it." Jason smiled, strangely honored. "Guess I passed." Carter nodded once, then turned toward the house. Inside, the warmth settled immediately. Wood, iron, quiet order. Military gear neatly stored. No excess. Carter changed clothes, simple dark jacket, clean boots. When he reached for Coda's collar, the dog did not move. Coda stood still. Ears slightly back. Tail low. Eyes fixed. Not on Carter, but on the open doorway, the fading light beyond. Carter paused. "Coda?" The dog's breathing was steady, but his body was tense, like a held note. Carter crouched, resting a hand against Coda's chest. He could feel the slow, powerful heartbeat beneath his palm. "It's fine," Carter said, voice low. "I'll be with you." Coda looked at him then, really looked, and after a moment stepped forward. But something lingered in his posture, a quiet warning, unspoken. The hotel by the lake glowed against the darkening sky. Laughter drifted through its windows, warm and distant. Inside, faces from the past gathered under soft lights and polite music. People hugged, stories were told with edges sanded smooth. Carter entered with Coda at his side. A few heads turned. Recognition flickered, uncertain at first. Then Maya Lennox spotted him. Maya had always been tall, even as a teenager. Now, in her mid-30s, she carried herself with relaxed confidence. Her dark hair fell in loose waves to her shoulders, streaked faintly with early silver. Her skin was warm-toned, her smile open, eyes kind but perceptive. "Carter?" she said, stepping closer. "Wow. Hey, Maya." She looked him over, not judgmentally, just taking in the changes. Then she crouched slightly toward Coda. "And you must be the famous one." Coda's tail moved once, careful, polite. "He's beautiful," Maya said, "and calm. Smart eyes." Carter felt something loosen in his chest. "He's been good to me." Maya smiled, then glanced around. "I'm glad you came." "So am I," Carter said, and meant it. Then a voice cut through the warmth. "Well, would you look at that?" It came from behind them, loud enough to carry. "Didn't think the quiet kid would show." Coda's head snapped around. A low growl rolled from his chest before Carter could stop it. The man standing there was Brock Maddox. Broad, heavyset now, with thinning hair and a smile that had never learned kindness. He wore an expensive coat, the kind meant to be noticed. His eyes were sharp, restless, still searching for a way to be on top of the room. "Easy," Brock said mockingly. Didn't know he was still jumpy. Coda's hackles lifted. Carter's hand came down gently on Coda's collar. "Hey," Carter murmured. Coda didn't lunge, didn't bark, but he did not look away from Brock. Brock chuckled. "Careful, buddy. Sensitive dogs get hurt. Owners, too." For a moment, no one spoke. Carter met Brock's eyes calmly, and in that quiet space between them, something old stirred. Not anger, not fear, but memory. Heavy, unfinished. Carter straightened. "Good evening, Brock," he said. Coda's growl faded, but his body stayed ready. And somewhere deep inside Carter, a familiar thought surfaced, steady and unwelcome. I didn't come back for this. The moment did not explode. It settled. That was how Carter felt it, like dust disturbed long ago finally drifting down, landing where it had always intended to. The hotel's warm light, the low murmur of conversation, the faint clink of glasses, all of it continued, but something underneath had shifted. Brock Maddox stood where he always had, slightly too close, chest forward, chin lifted in a way that suggested confidence but was really habit. Time had broadened him. His shoulders were thick now, his waist heavier, his hairline retreating. He wore an expensive watch that caught the light when he moved his hands, as if to announce value before words could. What time had not changed was the way Brock looked at people, not directly, but like he was measuring where they stood in relation to him. Coda's gaze never left Brock. The German shepherd stood tall at Carter's side, muscles held in quiet readiness. His ears were forward, tail low but steady. He was not aggressive. He was alert in the way animals were when something old resurfaced, something remembered in scent and sound rather than image. "Hey," Carter said softly, his hand resting against Coda's collar. "Stay." Coda obeyed, though the tension in his body did not ease. Maya shifted beside Carter, her brow furrowing. She had always been perceptive, even as a teenager, the kind of girl who noticed who stopped talking when certain people entered a room. "Brock," she said evenly, "it's a reunion. Let's keep it that way." Brock smirked. "Relax, Maya, just catching up with an old friend." Friend. Carter let the word pass without reaction. He had learned, over years of training and longer years of remembering, that correcting people rarely corrected anything. "I didn't know dogs were allowed," Brock continued, glancing pointedly at Coda. "Guess some people never grow out of their attachments." A few nearby guests laughed, uncertain, polite, the kind of laughter people used when they didn't want to be the target next. Carter felt the familiar sensation in his chest. Not anger, not fear. Something quieter, a tightening. The memory of standing in hallways while conversations curved around him. The memory of being talked about not to. He breathed once, slow and measured. "Coda's with me," Carter said. His voice was calm, unraised. "If that's a problem, I can step outside." The offer was genuine. Carter had learned long ago the value of exits. Brock blinked, clearly not expecting that. He recovered quickly. "No need," Brock said. "Wouldn't want to scare you off again." Again. The word landed. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but Carter lifted a hand slightly. A quiet signal. She stopped. "It's fine," Carter said. And he meant it, not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't own him anymore. They moved away toward the refreshments. Conversation resumed, though its tone had shifted. Carter noticed the subtle changes. Glances that lingered, whispers not meant to be heard, but never fully hidden. Coda walked at Carter's side, head level with his thigh. The dog's presence grounded him, a steady rhythm of breath and movement. "Do you want a drink?" Maya asked. Carter shook his head. "Later." She studied him, then nodded. "I'm glad you came," she said again, quieter this time. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Carter admitted. They shared a brief smile, something honest, uncomplicated. As Maya stepped away to greet someone else, Carter found himself alone near the window overlooking the frozen lake. The ice reflected the lights from inside, fractured and shimmering. It reminded him of something he couldn't quite name. He felt Coda shift, not forward, not back, sideways. Coda's head turned, eyes tracking something Carter hadn't noticed yet. Carter followed the line of that gaze. A man stood near the bar, partially obscured by a pillar. He was younger than most in the room, late 20s maybe. Tall, athletic. He wore a dark jacket, military posture evident even in stillness. His hair was cropped short, his face clean-shaven, features sharp but composed. There was an alertness to him, a restraint that came from discipline rather than fear. The man wasn't watching the room. He was watching Brock. Coda let out a low, questioning sound. Not a growl this time, but something closer to a breath held too long. Carter frowned slightly. The man noticed. His eyes flicked briefly toward Carter, then to Coda. Something passed across his face. Recognition? Relief? It was gone too quickly to name. He looked away and lifted his glass, pretending interest in the television mounted above the bar. Carter straightened slowly. Re-hook moment, mid-chapter. For a split second, so brief Carter almost dismissed it, Coda took one step forward on his own, body angling not toward Brock, but toward the man by the bar. It was the wrong direction. Carter tightened his grip on the leash. "Coda," he murmured. The dog stopped instantly, looked up at him, then back at the man. The moment passed. Conversation swelled again around them, but Carter felt it settle deep in his gut. "Pay attention." Brock's laughter cut across the room again. "Speaking of success," Brock said loudly, addressing a small cluster of classmates. "My boy's doing pretty well for himself. Military, special unit. Not everyone can handle that kind of pressure." The man by the bar stiffened almost imperceptibly. Carter didn't turn. Someone asked, "Is he here tonight?" Brock grinned. "Nah, too busy saving the world." There was admiration in the responses. Pride. Brock drank it in. Carter felt Coda relax slightly, confusion replacing tension. He glanced back toward the bar. The man was gone. Carter exhaled slowly. Time moved. Conversation shifted. Plates emptied. Laughter softened as nostalgia took over. Carter spoke with a few people. Short exchanges, polite questions. He listened more than he talked. He always had. He learned who had stayed, who had left, who had circled back. Lives summarized in minutes, careers compressed into titles. And through it all, Brock remained loud, central, unavoidable. At one point, Brock approached again, drink in hand. "So," he said, leaning against a table, "heard you're in the military now." "Yes. What, like, full-time?" Carter nodded. "Something like that." Brock snorted. "Figures. You were always good at following rules." Carter met his eyes. "Sometimes." Brock studied him, clearly trying to find the angle that would land. "You married?" "No." "Kids?" "No." Brock gestured vaguely. "Dogs filling that role, I guess." Carter didn't answer right away. Coda shifted, pressing closer to his leg. "He's family," Carter said simply. Brock opened his mouth, then paused. For the first time that night, something like uncertainty crossed his face. He scoffed and waved it off. "Whatever works for you." Brock turned away. Carter watched him go, not with resentment, but with a strange clarity. He saw now what he hadn't been able to as a teenager. Brock's need to dominate came from a place that was already collapsing. Coda looked up at Carter, amber eyes steady. "I know," Carter murmured. They stood like that for a moment, man and dog, anchored in the present. Outside, the lake ice shifted softly with a sound like distant cracking. Natural, unthreatening. The room continued to remember its past, but Carter no longer belonged to it. The memory did not arrive gently. It came the way winter sometimes did in the north, quiet at first, then suddenly everywhere. Carter Vale stood near the window of the hotel, one hand resting loosely at his side, the other holding Coda's leash. The room behind him was full of voices and laughter, but they blurred together into a low, indistinct hum. His reflection in the glass looked older than he felt. Broader shoulders, sharper lines, but his eyes were unmistakably the same. Still watching, still measuring. Coda shifted again, closer this time, his flank brushing Carter's leg. The dog's coat was warm and dense under Carter's fingers, the sable pattern dark along the spine, lighter at the chest. 5 years old now, fully grown, calm in a way that came from trust rather than training. Carter lowered his gaze to him. "I know," he murmured. Coda didn't look up. His attention was elsewhere, on the room, on the soundscape of old names and older dynamics. Dogs remembered differently than people, not with words, with tone, with rhythm, with the body language humans forgot they were using. Across the room, Brock Maddox laughed again, too loudly, too long. That sound did it. Carter's mind slipped backward, not all at once, but in fragments. A locker door, a chalkboard. The smell of disinfectant and wet coats drying by heaters. High school. The school had been small, brick and utilitarian, set against a line of bare trees that rattled in the wind each winter. Carter had been smaller then, thinner. His shoulders sloped inward, as if he were trying to take up less space in the world. His father had died when Carter was 13. A logging accident, sudden, final. After that, his mother, Evelyn Vale, a quiet woman with prematurely gray hair and hands rough from factory work, had learned how to speak with her eyes instead of her mouth. She loved her son fiercely, but grief had made her cautious, protective, sometimes too quick to believe authority over instinct. Carter learned early that explanations rarely changed outcomes. Coda had come into his life a year later. Back then, Coda was all legs and ears, a German shepherd puppy with oversized paws and a clumsy gait. His fur had been softer then, his eyes too big for his face. He followed Carter everywhere with unearned confidence, as if the world could not possibly be dangerous while Carter existed in it. Carter talked to him, not because he was lonely, though he was, but because Coda listened. Head tilted, tail wagging, no judgment, no interruption. Most afternoons they met behind the old gym where the snow piled high and no one bothered them. Carter would throw sticks. Coda would chase, trip over his own feet, tumble, and get back up as if failure were a minor inconvenience. That was when Brock noticed. Brock Maddox had been taller even then, broader, loud in a way that filled hallways. His father owned half the construction contracts in town. Brock wore that knowledge like armor. He also noticed Maya Lennox, sharp-eyed, curious, unafraid to sit next to the quiet kid because she chose people by interest, not reputation. Brock had seen her talk to Carter once, twice, enough. The afternoon it happened, Carter hadn't seen Brock approach. He was crouched in the snow, laughing softly as Coda pounced on a stick that was too big for him. "Hey," Brock called out. "You really talking to a dog now." Carter froze. Behind Brock were two other boys, faces already curled into anticipation, the kind that came when cruelty promised entertainment. Coda, oblivious, bounded forward. He was a puppy, playful. He grabbed the hem of Brock's pant leg with his teeth, not hard, just enough to tug, tail wagging wildly. It lasted less than a second. Brock reacted without thinking. His boot came up and struck Coda square in the ribs. The sound was dull. Final. Coda yelped. A sharp, broken sound Carter would remember years later in quieter rooms. Something in Carter snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like a switch being flipped. He stood and shoved Brock hard. Brock fell backward into the snow, more surprised than hurt. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Brock shouted, scrambling up. Carter didn't answer. He dropped to his knees beside Coda, hands shaking as he pulled the puppy close. Coda whimpered, pressing into Carter's chest, trust intact even in pain. Teachers arrived quickly. Voices rose. Brock cried, loudly, convincingly. "He attacked me," Brock said. "His dog bit me." Carter tried to speak. Words tangled in his throat. No one looked at Coda. No one asked why Brock had been near them. Later, at home, Evelyn Vale listened to the school's account over the phone, her shoulders slumping with every sentence. When she hung up, she looked at her son with tired eyes. "You can't do that, Carter," she said. You can't hit people." "He hurt Coda," Carter said. His voice cracked. Evelyn sighed. She believed him, but belief wasn't enough to change consequences. Carter was grounded. Coda's ribs healed slowly. Brock never apologized. Instead, he learned something. That lying worked. The memory loosened its grip as Carter blinked, returning to the present. The hotel room was warmer now. Or maybe Carter was. Coda lifted his head and looked up at him, amber eyes searching his face. "It's over," Carter said quietly. "That part." Coda's ears flicked. He accepted the words, if not the certainty. A woman approached Carter cautiously. She was older than most of the attendees, late 50s perhaps, with short silver hair and a posture that carried both authority and regret. Her coat was modest, practical. Her eyes were kind, but careful. "Carter Vale?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Eleanor Price," she said. "I taught English here, back then." Recognition sparked. Carter nodded. She clasped her hands together. "I wanted to say, I'm glad you're here. I wish I'd said more years ago." Carter studied her face, searching for pretense, found none. "Thank you," he said. Eleanor hesitated, then added, "Some of us knew. About that day, we didn't act." Carter absorbed that, the weight of it, the relief. "It mattered," he said, and surprised himself by meaning it. Eleanor smiled sadly and stepped away. Rehook moment, mid-chapter. As Eleanor disappeared into the crowd, Coda suddenly turned, not toward Brock, not toward the door, but toward the far end of the room. His body went still, not tense, focused. Carter followed his gaze. Near the hallway leading to the restroom stood a man in a dark jacket, posture straight, hands loosely clasped. He wasn't watching Brock this time. He was watching Carter. Their eyes met. The man gave the smallest nod, respectful, deliberate, then turned and walked away before Carter could respond. Coda exhaled slowly, tension draining from his frame. Carter didn't know why, but the gesture settled something deep in his chest. The night wore on. Brock's voice grew louder, his stories grew bigger, his need to be seen sharpened. Carter spoke less. He didn't need to prove anything, not here. When Brock passed him again, their shoulders brushed. For a moment, Brock stiffened, as if expecting confrontation. None came. Carter met his eyes once. calm, unchallenging. Brock looked away first. Coda remained at Carter's side, steady as a compass needle. Outside, the frozen lake groaned softly as the temperature dropped. A natural sound, nothing breaking, nothing ending. Carter felt something close, though. Not resolution, but readiness. The room had changed without anyone announcing it. The laughter still rose and fell. Glasses still clinked. Music still played softly through hidden speakers. But the balance had shifted, like a floor that no longer quite leveled beneath certain feet. Carter Vale felt it in the way conversations angled away from Brock Maddox now, not sharply, not openly, but with a new caution. People listened less eagerly. Smiles came later. The room, in its quiet human way, had begun to remember more than Brock preferred. Carter stood near the edge of the gathering. Coda settled beside him. The German shepherd lay sphinx-like on the carpet, front paws crossed, head up. His ears twitched occasionally, tracking sound. His breathing was slow, measured. 5 years old, strong, balanced, not a guard dog, a witness. Carter took a sip of water and scanned the room, habit born of training rather than suspicion. Exits, corners, reflections in glass. He didn't expect trouble, but he always prepared for it. Brock, on the other hand, looked increasingly unprepared. He stood near the bar now, jacket draped over one arm, drink refilled too often. His face had taken on a faint flush, whether from alcohol or irritation was hard to tell. His laughter came half a beat too late, his stories stretching longer, louder, as if volume might fill a space that certainty once occupied. "You remember the old football games," Brock boomed to a small cluster of former classmates. "Man, those were days. Whole town watching." Someone nodded politely. Another glanced toward Carter, then back. Brock noticed. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Across the room, Maya Lennox approached Carter again, holding 2 small plates. "I grabbed these before they ran out," she said, offering one. "They're surprisingly good." Carter smiled faintly. "Thanks." She hesitated, then said quietly, "You okay?" Carter considered the question honestly. "Yes." Maya studied him for a moment, then nodded. She had always respected truth when she heard it. "Coda seems calmer," she added, crouching a little to let the dog sniff her hand. Coda leaned forward, nose brushing her fingers, then settled back down. "Trust, offered and accepted. He reads rooms better than most people," Carter said. Maya smiled. "I believe it." As she stood, a man approached from the hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence instantly distinct. He wore a simple dark coat, unadorned, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to be noticed to be certain of his place. He stopped a respectful distance from Carter. "Sir." The word was soft, but precise. Carter turned. It was Jason Hale. Up close, Jason looked younger than his posture suggested. Late 20s, clean-shaven, square jaw, eyes clear and steady. His hair was cut short, regulation neat. There was a faint scar along his left eyebrow, thin and pale, the kind earned in training rather than accident. Jason's spine was straight, his shoulders squared, but there was no stiffness in him, just discipline worn comfortably. Carter inclined his head. "Hale." Jason nodded once, then glanced down at Coda. "Evening," he said to the dog. Coda lifted his head, regarded Jason, then lowered it again, approval without ceremony. Jason exhaled slightly as if relieved. "I didn't expect to see you here," Jason said quietly. "Neither did I," Carter replied. Jason smiled at that, small, genuine. "My father insisted on coming. I was curious." Carter didn't respond immediately. he didn't need to ask who Jason's father was. Jason followed his gaze toward the bar, Brock Maddox. Jason's expression tightened for a fraction of a second, not anger, but something heavier. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "He talks a lot," Jason said, "when he's nervous." Carter studied Jason now, not as a superior officer, but as a man standing between two versions of truth. "You didn't have to come," Carter said. Jason shook his head. "I wanted to." They stood in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just unfilled. Then Brock saw them. His eyes locked onto Jason. His face brightened instantly, the practiced smile snapping back into place. "There he is," Brock called, raising his glass. "My boy." The room turned. Jason stiffened, not outwardly, but in the subtle way muscles prepared for impact. Carter didn't move. Jason walked forward, posture controlled, steps measured. He stopped in front of Brock. "Dad," Jason said. Brock clapped a hand on Jason's shoulder, squeezing too hard. "Didn't think you'd make it. Busy saving the world." Jason removed Brock's hand gently. "Just finished a training cycle." Brock laughed. "That's my son." A few people smiled. Others watched more carefully now. Brock followed Jason's line of sight, back to Carter. His smile faltered. "You know him?" Brock asked. Jason turned, facing Carter fully. He straightened, and then, without flourish, without volume, Jason rendered a perfect, formal salute. The room went silent. Carter returned it. 2 clean motions. Equal. Respectful. Brock stared between them, confusion bleeding into his expression. "Wait," Brock said, chuckling uncertainly. "What's this?" Jason lowered his hand. "Captain Vale is my commanding officer." The silence deepened. Someone near the buffet let out a small, involuntary sound. Brock's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not funny," Brock said. Jason didn't smile. "It's not a joke," Jason said evenly. "Sir, Captain Vale has been my direct superior for the past 18 months. Brock's laugh came out sharp. "You're saying him," he gestured vaguely at Carter, "is in charge of you?" Jason's jaw tightened. "Yes." Carter spoke then, calm as ever. "Good evening, Mr. Maddox." The honorific landed like a dropped glass. Brock looked around the room, searching for agreement. Found none. People were listening now, his face flushed deeper. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "guess the military lets anyone in these days." Jason turned to him slowly. "No," Jason said, "it doesn't." The words were not loud, they didn't need to be. Rehook moment, mid-chapter. As Brock opened his mouth to respond, Coda stood, not abruptly, not aggressively. He rose, placed himself half a step closer to Carter, between Carter and Brock, then sat again, gaze steady, unblinking. The movement was subtle, intentional. The room felt it. Jason's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Carter, with something new in them. Recognition. Brock swallowed. Someone coughed. Maya broke the silence. "Jason, do you want a drink?" Jason shook his head. "No, thank you," Brock scoffed. "Still following rules, huh?" Jason met his father's gaze. "Some rules matter." Brock's smile slipped again. "You always were too serious." Jason nodded. "I learned that somewhere." Carter watched the exchange with a steady calm. He felt no urge to intervene. Jason didn't need saving, he needed space. "I didn't know," Brock muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Jason's voice softened slightly. "You didn't ask." Brock looked away. The room exhaled slowly, conversation restarting in cautious murmurs. The moment had passed, but it had left its mark. Jason turned back to Carter. "I should have said something sooner." Carter shook his head. "You said what needed to be said." Jason nodded. Then, after a pause, he added, "Thank you for tonight, for everything." Carter met his eyes. "You earned it." Jason glanced down at Coda. "He's impressive." Coda tilted his head, ears relaxed. "He knows," Carter said. Jason smiled. This time, it reached his eyes. Across the room, Brock stood alone at the bar, drink untouched. The stories had stopped. The laughter had moved elsewhere. For the first time all night, Brock Maddox was quiet. Carter felt no triumph in it, only closure beginning to take shape. He rested a hand lightly on Coda's head. Outside, the lake ice shifted again, deep, resonant, alive, and inside the room, the past finally lost its voice. The silence Brock Maddox carried was louder than any of his stories. He stood at the bar with his back half turned to the room, drink untouched, shoulders set as if bracing against weather no one else felt. The confidence that had once filled the space around him had thinned into something brittle. He didn't leave, he didn't speak. He waited. Whether for a chance to reclaim ground or for the night to end, even he seemed unsure. Carter Vale noticed, then deliberately looked away. He had learned long ago that some reckonings ripened only when left undisturbed. Coda shifted at his side, rising from the carpet to stand. The German shepherd's posture was neutral, alert without tension. His amber eyes tracked movement across the room, the way people drifted into smaller clusters, the way laughter returned cautiously, the way Jason Hale moved with a gravity that drew attention without demanding it. Jason stood near the window now, hands loosely clasped behind his back, posture straight but not rigid. Up close, the faint scar at his eyebrow caught the light. He looked composed, but Carter recognized the signs, subtle ones, of a man holding himself together. The set of the jaw, the measured breath. Maya approached Jason with a glass of water. "You handled that with a lot of restraint," she said gently. Jason accepted the glass. "Thank you." "You didn't have to," Maya added. Jason looked toward Brock, then back to the lake. "I did." The room's energy had shifted from spectacle to reflection. People spoke in lower tones now. Old jokes had lost their edge. The reunion was becoming something else. Less about remembering who they were, more about acknowledging who they had become. Carter took that in, not with satisfaction but with relief. A man he didn't recognize stepped up beside him. A former classmate, maybe. Average height, thinning hair, the easy manner of someone who preferred not to stand out. "Hey," the man said, "I just wanted to say, I didn't know you back then, not really, but," he hesitated. "It looks like you turned out all right." Carter nodded once. "I did." The man smiled, a little sheepish, and drifted away. Jason returned, stopping a respectful distance from Carter. "Sir," he said quietly. Carter turned. "Hale." Jason's eyes flicked to Coda. "Mind if I say hello properly?" Carter inclined his head. Jason knelt slightly, keeping his movement slow and open. "You did good tonight," he said to Coda, voice even. "Thank you." Coda sniffed his hand, then leaned forward just enough to brush Jason's knuckles with his nose. Acceptance. Conditional, but real. Jason exhaled, a hint of tension leaving his shoulders. He stood. "I should talk to him," Jason said, nodding toward Brock. Carter didn't answer immediately. He studied Jason's face, saw the resolve, and beneath it, the ache. "Do it on your terms," Carter said, "not his." Jason nodded. "Yes, sir." He took a step, then paused. "For what it's worth, I didn't know any of this, not until tonight." Carter met his eyes. "You're not responsible for your father's choices." Jason swallowed. "I know, but I'm responsible for mine." He turned and walked toward the bar. Brock sensed him before he arrived. He straightened, turning with a guarded smile that faltered as soon as he saw his son's expression. "Jason," Brock said. "Look." "Not here," Jason said calmly. "Not like this." Brock scoffed. "You embarrassed me." Jason held his gaze. "You embarrassed yourself." The words landed cleanly. No anger, no heat. Brock's jaw worked. "You took his side." Jason shook his head. "I stood on mine." People nearby pretended not to listen. No one missed a word. Brock glanced around, then lowered his voice. "You don't know what it was like back then." Jason's tone softened, not in concession, but in clarity. "I know what it's like now." Brock looked away, eyes settling on the glass in his hand. For a moment he looked older than he was, smaller. Jason waited. When nothing came, he nodded once and stepped back. "I'm going outside," Jason said. "I'll be back." He passed Carter without looking, the weight of the exchange still clinging to him. Outside, the cold was bracing. The lake lay quiet under moonlight, a sheet of dull silver. Jason stood near the railing, breathing slowly, the night air cooling his thoughts. Carter joined him a moment later, Coda at his side. "You all right?" Carter asked. Jason nodded. "I will be." They stood together in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was earned. Jason glanced at Coda. "He knew," he said softly. Carter followed his gaze. He notices patterns. People revealed them. Jason smiled faintly. "Wish I'd learned that earlier." "You did," Carter said. "Just not the easy way." Jason's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, then tucked it away. "My mom," he said. "She's asking how it's going." Carter didn't comment. Jason stared out at the lake. "She won't like this." Carter chose his words carefully. "Truth has a way of complicating things." Jason nodded. "But it also simplifies others." They returned inside together. As they crossed the threshold, Coda stopped. Not abruptly, just enough to break stride. His head turned toward Brock, who stood alone now, shoulders slumped, drink finally set aside. Coda watched him for a long, unblinking moment. Then, slowly, Coda sat. Not between Carter and Brock this time. Not blocking. Waiting. Carter felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. This is not finished. Maya intercepted Carter near the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Carter said. "It's resolving." She studied him, then nodded. "I'm glad." Across the room, Brock's eyes met Carter's. For the first time that night, there was no mockery in them, no challenge, just uncertainty, and something like fear of being seen clearly. Brock cleared his throat and took a hesitant step forward. "Carter," he said. The room seemed to hold its breath. Carter turned fully to face him. Coda remained seated, gaze steady. Brock rubbed his palms together, a nervous habit Carter remembered. He stopped, started again. "I didn't know about all of it." Carter said nothing. Brock swallowed. "I was a kid. I was stupid." "Yes," Carter said, calm, unyielding. Brock flinched. I didn't think." Carter waited. The silence stretched. It did the work. Words could not. Brock's shoulders sagged. "I shouldn't have done what I did to you, to—" He glanced at Coda, then away. "To your dog." Coda's ears flicked. "I was angry," Brock continued, voice rough. "Jealous. You had people who cared. I didn't like that." Carter felt the old memory stir, then pass. "That explains it," he said. "It doesn't excuse it." Brock nodded quickly. "I know. I'm not asking for—" He gestured helplessly. I needed to say it." Carter studied him. The man before him was not the boy who had kicked a puppy. He was older, worn, still responsible. "What you needed," Carter said, "and what I need aren't the same thing." Brock's mouth tightened. Then, what do you need? Carter glanced down at Coda. Brock followed his gaze. Understanding dawned, slow, painful. Brock hesitated, pride warring with something deeper. Then he bent, awkwardly, stiffly, and lowered himself a fraction. "I'm sorry," he said, not to Carter but to the dog. "For what I did. You didn't deserve it." Coda did not move. Seconds passed. Then Coda stood, stepped forward once and stopped, close enough to sniff Brock's hand. He did not lick, he did not retreat. He accepted the apology without granting forgiveness. Carter felt something ease, not triumph, not vindication, alignment. "That's all," Carter said. Brock straightened, eyes wet, embarrassed and relieved all at once. "Thank you," he murmured. Whether to Carter or the room or the night itself was unclear. Carter nodded once. He turned away. The reunion continued around them, softer now, more honest. Old wounds did not vanish. They were named. That was enough for tonight. Carter rested his hand on Coda's head. Outside, the lake ice shifted with a low, resonant sound. Alive, enduring. Carter breathed in, steady. He was ready to leave. Leaving did not feel like escape. It felt like completion. Carter Vale stepped out of the hotel with Coda at his side, the cold air wrapping around them like a reset. Snow crunched beneath his boots, the sound clean and deliberate. The lights behind them glowed warm through the windows, muffled now, as if the building itself had learned to keep its distance. Coda walked close, shoulder brushing Carter's leg in an easy rhythm. His breath came steady, fogging faintly in the night. The German shepherd's sable coat caught the moonlight along the ridge of his back, dark and glossy, his amber eyes alert but untroubled. 5 years of shared routines had taught him when to be watchful and when to rest. Tonight he did both. Carter paused near the edge of the parking lot and looked back once. Not toward Brock, not toward the room, but toward the frozen lake beyond the hotel. Ice stretched wide and pale, reflecting the moon in fractured lines. It looked solid, it always did. Jason Hale stood a few paces away, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders squared against the cold. Up close, the discipline in him was unmistakable, but so was the fatigue that came from carrying two truths at once. His jaw was set, eyes distant, as if he were rehearsing a conversation he wasn't ready to have. "You heading out?" Jason asked. "Yes," Jason nodded. "I'll walk you." They moved together along the path that curved toward the lake overlook. The night was quiet. No wind, just the distant tick of ice contracting. "Thank you," Jason said after a moment, "for not turning it into something worse." Carter considered the words. "It wasn't mine to turn." Jason smiled faintly. "That's not how my dad would have handled it." "No," Carter agreed. They stopped at the railing. The lake lay below them, dark and vast. Jason leaned forward, resting his forearms on the cold metal. "My mother texted," he said. "She wants to talk tonight." Carter said nothing. "She won't like what I have to say," Jason continued. "But she deserves the truth." "She does," Carter said. "So do you." Jason breathed out slowly. "I spent a long time trying to be the version of myself that made him proud." Carter watched the moon's reflection fracture as a thin crack traveled across the ice. "Most people do," he said, "until they realize pride is a moving target." Jason nodded. "I don't want to be that kind of man." "You're not," Carter said. Jason looked at him then, really looked, saw not a commanding officer but a man who had stood where he was standing now and chosen a harder path. Coda shifted and sat, tail wrapping around his paws. He looked out over the lake, ears flicking once. Jason followed his gaze. He's calm now. He is, Carter said. He's been working all night. Jason smiled. Funny, he did more talking than anyone inside. Carter huffed a quiet laugh. He tends to. They stood in companionable silence, the kind that didn't demand resolution. After a moment, Jason straightened. I'll head back in, he said. There are things I should finish. Carter nodded. Take your time. Jason hesitated, then extended a hand. Carter shook it, firm, brief. Good night, sir, Jason said. Good night, Hale. Jason turned and walked back toward the hotel, posture steady, steps measured. Carter watched him go, then turned toward his truck parked farther down the lot. They had gone only a few steps when Coda stopped. Not abruptly, just enough to break the rhythm. Carter halted, fingers tightening lightly on the leash. What is it? Coda lifted his head, nostrils flaring. He turned, not toward the hotel, not toward the lake, but toward the tree line beyond the parking lot. His ears angled forward, his body still. Carter followed the line of his gaze. Nothing moved. The forest stood dark and dense, branches layered in shadow. Snow lay undisturbed at the edge, smooth as a blank page. Coda took one slow step forward. Carter felt the familiar prickle along his spine. The trained awareness that came not from fear, but from pattern recognition. Hold, he murmured. Coda obeyed, muscles coiled, eyes fixed. Rehook moment, mid-chapter. From the darkness between the trees, a single figure stepped into the moonlight. She moved carefully, boots crunching softly on snow. She was in her late 30s or early 40s, tall and lean, with a weathered parka zipped to her chin. Her hair, dark with streaks of gray, was pulled back into a practical knot. Her face was angular, sharp-cheeked, with eyes that missed very little. She stopped at a respectful distance, hands visible. Captain Vale, she said. Carter's posture did not change. That depends who's asking. She smiled faintly. Fair. My name's Rachel Morrow, park ranger. I was on patrol. Her voice was calm, unhurried, the tone of someone used to being believed because she rarely exaggerated. Coda watched her closely, head tilted, tail neutral. Rachel glanced at the dog. He's beautiful. Thank you, Carter said. Rachel shifted her weight. We've had a report of someone wandering near the lake after hours. Nothing serious, just unusual. Your dog alerted before my radio did. Coda's ears flicked. Carter studied her face, noting the steadiness, the absence of alarm. You find anyone? Rachel shook her head. Not yet. The moment stretched, then eased. Rachel nodded once. Enjoy the rest of your night. She turned and disappeared back into the trees, footsteps swallowed by snow and shadow. Coda watched until she was gone. Then he exhaled, tension draining from his frame. Carter let out the breath he'd been holding. Good catch, he said softly. Coda looked up, eyes bright, and wagged his tail once. They resumed walking. The drive home was quiet. Carter kept the window cracked, letting the cold air sharpen his thoughts. The road curved through trees and open stretches, headlights sweeping snowbanks into brief, glowing arcs. At home, Carter hung his coat, unbuckled Coda's collar, and poured water into the dog's bowl. Coda drank, then padded to the rug by the fireplace and settled down with a satisfied grunt. Carter sank into the chair opposite him, elbows on knees, hands loosely clasped. The night replayed itself, not in scenes, but in sensations. The weight of Brock's apology, Jason's steady voice, the way Coda had accepted words without granting absolution. It struck Carter then, not as revelation but as recognition, that closure was not an ending. It was a boundary. Coda lifted his head, meeting Carter's gaze. "I know," Carter said quietly. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees. Carter reached down and rested a hand on Coda's head. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes half-lidded, content. "I'm proud of you," Carter said, not as command, not as praise, but as truth. Coda's tail thumped once against the rug. Carter leaned back and closed his eyes. He didn't feel lighter. He felt steadier. Tomorrow would come with its own demands. Training schedules, decisions, the weight of responsibility. Tonight, he allowed himself this pause. The house held the quiet easily, and somewhere beyond the trees, the lake ice shifted again, deep, resonant, enduring. Carter breathed in, steady, he was home. Morning arrived without ceremony. Carter Vale woke before the alarm, the way he always did, the pale northern light already pressing against the edges of the curtains. For a few seconds, he lay still, listening to the house breathe, the low hum of the heater, the faint creak of cooling wood, the steady rhythm of another presence nearby. Coda lay on the rug at the foot of the bed, curled but not asleep. One amber eye opened when Carter shifted. His tail thumped once against the floor, restrained, respectful of the hour. "Easy," Carter murmured. Coda settled again, content simply to know where Carter was. Carter swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, longer than usual. There were no dreams clinging to him this morning, no echoes from the reunion, no sharp images of Brock's face or the weight of old words. What remained felt quieter than relief. It felt earned. He dressed slowly, thermal shirt, worn jeans, thick socks, then clipped Coda's collar and leash. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. Snow untouched except for the tracks of a fox that had crossed the yard sometime before dawn. The lake beyond the trees was hidden by fog now, its presence implied rather than seen. They walked the familiar loop through the woods, boots crunching. Coda's stride confident but unhurried. He stopped once to sniff the air, then moved on, satisfied. Whatever vigilance had kept him alert the night before had softened into routine again. As they returned, Carter noticed a truck pulled off near the edge of his property, state green, dusted with snow. The engine was off. A woman leaned against the hood, arms crossed, breath visible in the cold. Rachel Morrow straightened when she saw them. She looked different in daylight, less shadowed, more clearly defined. Tall, lean, her ranger's jacket worn at the cuffs, her face lined not by age but by weather and long hours outdoors. Her eyes were sharp but not hard, observant, not suspicious. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Carter replied. Coda paused, then wagged his tail once, polite but reserved. Rachel smiled at that. "He remembers me." "He remembers patterns," Carter said. "People who don't rush." Rachel nodded, accepting the explanation without question. "I wanted to check in. We found nothing by the lake last night. Probably a lost tourist who thought ice meant safety." Carter grimaced. "It doesn't." "No," she agreed. "It really doesn't." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the kind that didn't push to be filled. "I heard about the reunion," Rachel said eventually. "Small towns talk." Carter gave a faint smile. "They always have." "You okay?" she asked. Not as a ranger, but as someone who knew how long the past could linger in places like this. "Yes," Carter said, and meant it. "More than I expected." Rachel studied him, then nodded once. "Good." She glanced at Coda. "He's steady." "He keeps me that way," Carter said. Rachel pushed off the hood. "Well, If you see anything unusual, you know how to reach me." "I do." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, people change slower than landscapes. But they do change." Carter met her eyes. So do boundaries. Rachel smiled at that, then climbed into her truck and drove off, tires crunching over snow until the sound faded into the trees. Inside, Carter brewed coffee and stood at the counter while it cooled, watching steam curl upward. Coda settled nearby, chin resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded but attentive. Carter's phone buzzed. A message from Jason Hale. "I talked to my mother. It was hard, necessary. Thank you for everything. I'll be requesting reassignment closer to home. Not running, just choosing." Carter read it twice. Then he typed back, "That's leadership. Proud of you." The reply came quickly. "Sir, thank you." Carter set the phone down and exhaled slowly. He felt no need to say more. Mid-morning brought a knock at the door. Carter opened it to find Maya Lennox standing on the porch, bundled in a wool coat, scarf pulled high against the cold. She looked exactly as she always had, curious, observant, unafraid to stand where others hesitated. "I hope this isn't strange," she said. "I was driving by, thought I'd say goodbye before heading back." "Come in," Carter said. She stepped inside, glancing around the cabin. Simple, orderly, lived in. "This suits you," she said. "It always would have." Coda approached, tail wagging more freely now. Maya crouched, scratching behind his ears. "You saved him, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Carter considered correcting her, then didn't. "We saved each other." Maya stood, hands tucked into her pockets. "Brock called me this morning." Carter raised an eyebrow. "He didn't say much," she continued. "Just apologized for things he never named back then." Carter nodded. "That sounds like him." She studied Carter's face. "Do you forgive him?" Carter didn't answer right away. He looked down at Coda, at the slow rise and fall of his chest. "I don't carry him anymore," Carter said. "That's enough." Maya smiled, soft, understanding. "It is." She lingered a moment longer, then stepped toward the door. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "So am I." After she left, the day unfolded gently. Carter split firewood, the rhythm familiar and grounding. Coda watched from the porch, occasionally trotting over to inspect a fallen log before returning to his post. By afternoon, clouds thickened, snow beginning to fall in light, steady sheets. Carter sat by the window with a book he wasn't really reading. Coda pressed close, warmth and weight reassuring. Rehook, moment, mid-chapter. A sudden sound cut through the quiet. A sharp crack, distant but distinct. Coda's head snapped up. He moved to the window, body alert, tail still. Carter followed his gaze to the lake, barely visible through the snowfall. A long, dark line had appeared where there should have been none. The ice was breaking. They stood there together, watching as the crack widened slowly, water rising to claim what had only hours ago seemed solid. Carter felt a chill, not of fear, but recognition. Nothing that looks strong stays that way forever. Coda leaned into him, steady as ever. The moment passed. The lake settled into a new shape, honest in its danger. That evening, Carter cooked a simple meal and ate quietly, the fire casting low light across the room. Coda gnawed contentedly on a bone, tail thumping softly against the floor. Later, as night fell, Carter stepped outside one last time. Snow had blanketed everything now, smoothing edges, muting sound. The world felt paused, waiting. Carter breathed in, deep and slow. He thought of the boy he had been, quiet, overlooked, holding on to a wounded puppy like it was the only truth he knew. He thought of the man he was now, Not invincible, not unscarred, but grounded. He knelt beside Coda, resting his forehead briefly against the dog's broad skull. "We're good," Carter said. Coda's tail thumped twice, decisive. Inside, Carter turned off the lights one by one and headed for bed. Tomorrow would bring work. Training schedules, decisions, the steady demands of command. He welcomed it. As he lay down, Coda rose and circled once before settling near him, a solid presence in the dark. The past did not vanish, but it no longer had a voice. Only memory, quiet, contained, finally at rest. Sometimes, what we call a miracle is not lightning from the sky, but a quiet moment where something broken finally stops hurting. Sometimes it's not God changing the world around us, but God giving us the strength to walk through it without becoming bitter. A wounded boy grows into a steady man. A silent dog becomes a compass of truth. The past does not disappear, but it loses its power. If there is a miracle here, it is this: that pain does not get the final word, that love, patience, and courage still matter, even when no one is watching. In everyday life, we all carry unseen stories. We don't know what battles the quiet person is fighting. We don't know what wounds shaped the calm ones. So choose kindness, choose restraint, choose truth. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story made you feel or remember. And if you believe in stories that heal rather than shout, consider subscribing so we can keep telling them together. May God watch over you, guide your steps when the road is unclear, and give you peace in the places that still ache. And may you remember, even in the coldest seasons, nothing good is ever truly lost.